herein lies the rub. And we have to go back to the mid-1980s. In the mid-1980s, the Republicans campaigned around the country and convinced America that it was a great idea to engage in international free trade. And the basic thought of that day was, you know what? So much of the rest of the world is poor. We're gonna open up free trade. Everyone's gonna find their specialization in products and services and so forth. And in the process, we're gonna lift the standards of the rest of the world. Well, what really happened was we lowered the standards of America, and we did lift the standards of the rest of the world to a great degree, but America got the short end of that stick. Now we go to the next step. Let's specifically talk about China. The Chinese have always dreamed about being the global superpower. The Chinese in mainland China are a very proud people. They're also very resentful of the West. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but when I lived there for 10 years on and off, more or less, often I had the idea that it was the Napoleonic concept. Little guy trying to be this big giant on the international scene, and that kind of summarizes the attitude of the Chinese today in 2022. So what they did with that free trade opportunity is they exploited the heck out of it. They built so many factories and service providers in every industry you could imagine. It was all done on borrowed money, which is why now they're imploding economically. But you just name your product. It doesn't matter what it is. Let's just take something common like knives and forks, or shoes or hats, garments of any kind. Doesn't matter. It can be computers. It could be cars. It does not matter. Every single product you can imagine. The Chinese government went out and financed and helped Chinese citizens build 15, 20, 25, 30 big production facilities for each type of product you could imagine. And then we're talking about all the private people that built smaller production facilities. So the whole idea from the Chinese point of view was they were going to be the world's workshop. And markets meant way more than profits, because obviously most of those companies never made profits, because what they were chasing was market share. And because the labor was so low, like in the mid-1980s and at the end of the 1980s when I showed up in the Asian world, the Chinese worker was making $600 a month if they were lucky. But in order to get that $600 a month, they were working 6.5 days a week. And the 6 days they were working 10 or 12 hours a day, and then the half a day, they were still putting in a good 6 hours, and they had that little bit of time off. So they were essentially working for pennies on the hour, and that was the model that China used. In their minds, they were thinking they were going to use that mechanism of becoming the world's workshop to basically decimate production in the rest of the world. And we're talking about Western Europe, we're talking about North America, we're talking about Africa, we're talking about Latin America, we're talking about Australia, we're talking about the rest of the world. And that model persisted all the way up until the pandemic, which started in 2020, as everybody knows. So what happened in 2020 was everything had to shut down, starting with Wuhan in China. And at this point in time, dozens and dozens of Chinese cities have shut down, and some of them are still in lockdown. And places like Shanghai have been in and out of lockdown numerous times over this 2.5 year time period. But the key difference is the Chinese government did not have the money to give to anybody during the shutdowns. So essentially, the Chinese government told everybody to go home, stay home. They actually, in some places, they actually put boards over people's windows and doors. They basically sealed them inside their houses so they couldn't get out. They couldn't go shopping for food. They couldn't do anything. They were essentially, literally caged. Millions upon millions and millions of people. This has been going on for 2.5 years. But the government shut the economy down, and they did not give anybody compensatory money to help them through the process. partly because the Chinese government doesn't have the money to give. So now we have an imploding Chinese economy, but on the government and military side, they're still dreaming about being the global superpower. And the thing that stands in their way, of course, is America and its allies. So they naturally see America, Western Europe, the Western Pacific, Australia. We are the enemies of the Chinese people, and America is the backbone of that collection of enemies. So they look at us and they say, as long as America is around, they cannot be the global superpower. So it's this Napoleonic dream that they have, and it doesn't appear to have gone away even as their country becomes economically devastated during the pandemic years.